Support for WUWM podcast comes from Hop Harvest and Vine and Good Harvest Market in Milwaukee, part of One Destination, combining farm-to-table dining, local craft beers, and organic groceries under one roof. More at goodharvestmarket.com.
From 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR, this is Lake Effect. I'm Joy Powers. Today we'll learn about the coyotes you see around the city and how we can best cohabitate with them.
You don't have to worry about coyotes. Typically what we tell people is if you see a coyote, from a safe distance, observe that coyote, watch it.
Then we'll share a bonus episode of WUWM's immigration podcast, Status Pending. Plus, we'll tell you about a comedy tournament coming to Milwaukee this weekend.
You'll hear 126 jokes in 100 minutes, a very fast-paced, rapid-fire, single elimination joke tournament. And audience applause determines who advances, so it really depends on what everybody there likes.
All of that is coming up on Lake Effect. This is Lake Effect from 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. I'm Joy Powers, and thank you so much for joining us. You may be seeing more coyotes roaming the streets of Milwaukee, but these aren't new neighbors. Native to Wisconsin, coyotes have adapted to urban living, and their activity increases now through March. Coyotes can be found in nearly all major cities in the U.S. While they don't pose much of a threat to humans, it is advised to keep an eye on your pets. To learn more, WUWM's Eric Vaughn Fellow Maria Peralta Arellano is joined by UW-Madison professor and Extension wildlife specialist, David Drake.
I think it's fitting to start at the population. What numbers are we currently looking at? Are they shrinking? Are they growing? Just what trends are also following the coyotes?
Yeah, so the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is the management authority. They have the regulatory authority over coyotes because coyotes are considered a state species, not necessarily a migratory species. And so because they are, confined within the boundaries of our state, then our Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, or the DNR, has management authority over that. And the DNR does not keep track of the number of coyotes. So we don't know exactly how many coyotes are in the state, and we don't really even have a population estimate with confidence intervals to suggest how many coyotes are in the state. However, it is thought that the coyote population is very healthy in terms of numbers because there is a regulated coyote season where people can trap and or hunt coyotes during a portion of the year. But Wisconsin is one of, I think, 39 states in the country that have an open season on coyotes. So if you are a landowner or you're renting land, anytime you see a coyote on your property, as long as it's legal for you to discharge a firearm or to discharge a bow and arrow, for example, you can kill that coyote any time of the year. Typically, that happens out in the rural areas. You could not necessarily do that in the city, for example, because it's not legal to discharge a firearm or a bow and arrow. But the fact that we've got an open season in coyotes would suggest that the numbers of coyotes are healthy and that harvest that's coming out of the coyote population is sustainable.
So still sticking with the population of coyotes, how is climate change affecting them, if at all? And I mean that more in terms of how they're finding shelter or food, pretty much surviving and dealing with the changes that we're also dealing with.
Yeah, so I would suggest that climate change is probably not having an effect on them at all. And the reason for that is they have experienced a continental wide range expansion. So we just talked briefly about the fact that historically they were in the southwestern part of the United States, down through the Yucatan Peninsula into, kind of northern Mexico. They are now across the entire United States and across the entire southern half of Canada. And that has occurred for a number of reasons. It's occurred because these animals are extremely adaptable. They're extremely flexible in their behavioral patterns, in their ecology. So in terms of what they eat, the types of habitats that they can inhabit. And to some extent, that range expansion has occurred because of the decrease in wolves, which are a natural predator of coyotes. And so as the wolf population has decreased especially across the top of the United States and through Canada, that's allowed coyotes to move into areas free of predation. So it's unlikely that climate change would affect them because they're such an adaptable species. And if anything, it's going to probably allow them to push even further north in their range.
Are you able to point to a few examples of that adaptability that has allowed them to expand that
Sure.
much?
So probably the best example is the fact that they have inhabited or colonized where they've moved into new areas, into urban areas. And there probably is not a city in the United States and Canada, especially southern Canada, where coyotes are either not permanently inhabiting that urban area and or are on the outskirts of the urban area, getting set to move in. So that range expansion has occurred from west to east. So the western cities, midwestern cities, we've had coyotes in cities, for decades. On the east coast of the United States and the east coast of Canada, coyotes are not throughout perhaps necessarily the entirety of a city, but they're certainly on the outskirts of the city or starting to move into the perimeter of the city. And likely over time, they're going to replicate what we see in the Midwest and the West cities, where they are inhabiting the entirety of the city. So that's a really good example of just how flexible these animals are.
Where is it more likely that you will see them, find them?
I don't have a definitive answer for you, but I'm going to hypothesize that it's most likely in urban areas, and so in cities. And the reason for that is because in cities, and this is not unique to coyotes, this is true for urban deer, urban turkeys, urban crows, urban raccoons, urban coyotes. Typically, a species that is inhabited in an urban area, they are higher in terms of density. So there's more numbers of individuals per species in an urban area than there is in a rural area. And the reason for that is that these urban areas are very rich in resources. So there's a lot of food available for them. There's a lot of water access, even in northern areas during the winter. There's a lot of denning sites, nesting sites, things like that. And these animals don't have to move as much in terms of home range or distance in urban areas to satisfy all their needs of food, water, shelter, because you're in a much more resource-rich area in the urban area. In rural areas, we typically don't have as many coyotes per square mile, for example. And the reason for that is the resources are spread out more and they're not as rich, they're not as dense in terms of availability and abundance in rural areas as they are in urban areas. And on top of that, in urban areas, you've got a lot more people per square mile or whatever density measure you want to look at. And so you've got in a bounded, relatively small area, you've got a lot of people, relatively speaking, and you've got a lot of coyotes, relatively speaking. And so the opportunity for a coyote to be seen by somebody in the city is greater than it is in rural areas.
We should always be wary of wild animals, but is it one of those animals where you don't take your eye off of until you're safe? Or
Yeah.
what kind of safety recommendations exist for, dealing with coyotes?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. It's a very common question amongst people, especially in urban areas. So generally, you don't have to worry about coyotes. I will say that. And typically, what we tell people is if you see a coyote, regardless of where you are in the landscape, if you see a coyote, from a safe distance, observe that coyote, watch it as much as you want to. If you've got kids with you, use that as a teachable moment. Maybe coyotes are in the canid family, so they're related to our domestic dogs. Maybe make some comparisons between what you see that coyote doing and what you see your domestic dog doing. And there's a lot of familiarity there simply because they are in the canid family. Especially in urban areas, we encourage people then to haze every time they see a coyote, to haze that coyote. And hazing is just simply a technique to scare the coyote. So you might just wave your arms and yell, "Hey, go away," or you might throw a rock or a stick near or in the direction of that coyote, not necessarily hit the coyote, but just to kind of scare it out of the way. Or if you see a coyote in your car, honk, something to reinstill and to maintain that fear of humans in coyotes. And as long as those coyotes are fearful of us, when they see us on the landscape, primarily in cities, they may not necessarily run away from us, but as long as they don't continue to advance on us, or if they maybe will stop and observe us, to study us, and then they might just casually walk off in a different direction. that's the proper response that we want to see from coyotes. We don't want them to advance toward us. We don't want them to be aggressive. Now, there are times when coyotes are aggressive, and if you look at Southern California, for example, in some of the urban areas there are examples where coyotes, and I'm going to say regularly, but I'm going to put my finger quotations on this, that there is some regular contact between coyotes and humans where coyotes are attacking human beings. So they might scratch them, they might chase them, and they might bite them. What's more common, and again, when I say common, I'm going to put finger quotations up because it's not like it happens every day. But occasionally coyotes will attack domestic dogs or eat domestic cats and things like that. And that typically happens this time of the year, because right now between December and March, coyotes are starting to breed. And then April to June or so, they'll start raising their pups. And during that breeding cycle and during the pup rearing cycle, they're defensive because they want to make sure they're protecting their pups and protecting their territory and their pack and things like that. So typically, coyotes will be a little bit more aggressive if people are coming in the direction of the den site or where the pups are, especially if you have a dog with you. But again, I don't want to cultivate fear in people. That it is very rare that coyotes attack dogs or cats. It's very, very rare that people are attacked. And as a matter of fact, in Wisconsin, we've not had a coyote attack on a person that I'm aware of in the history of Wisconsin.
And you had kind of gotten into this a little bit with the hazing, wanting them to still have that proper fear of being around us so they aren't overly aggressive. Say a person is having an issue. I'm a gardener, so I'm just going to use a garden as an example. Say a coyote is frequently in my garden, maybe tearing things up or causing an issue, or leaving unwanted things. What are some things that we can do to kind of coyote proof our spaces or make them less interesting?
Yeah, well, from your specific example, I would say having a coyote around is welcoming, especially from a gardening standpoint, because coyotes, they're eating the rabbits, they're eating the chipmunks, they're eating a lot of the pest species that may be actually damaging some of the garden produce you're trying to grow. So having a coyote around, as long as that coyote is not being aggressive or causing problems in other ways, having a coyote around is not a bad thing at all. So in addition to hazing coyotes, don't leave either intentionally or unintentionally, do not leave attractants on your property for coyotes that coyotes might find valuable to them. So for example, don't feed your pets outside and don't leave, unattended pet food outside. If you have a barbecue grill, that drip pan is very tasty and smells good to a lot of animals, not just coyotes, but raccoons and skunk and all sorts of other animals like that you might be attracting. So that's an example of an unintentional attractant where, the drip pan is not there to attract animals. It's there to catch things from your grill, but it is something the animals are going to find. So maybe do an inventory of your property and make sure, like your trash cans are secure so animals can't get into your trash cans. Make sure that you don't have some type of food source on the landscape in your yard that animals might find attractive. As I mentioned, coyotes are primarily active at nighttime. If you have a dog and coyotes are around and people are concerned about coyote aggression toward their dog, when you let your dog outside at night, even in a fenced yard, you probably want to keep an eye on that dog or make sure you have a motion sensor light that goes on that you can, make sure that the coyote they don't feel as comfortable coming into well-lit areas at nighttime. So that would prevent the coyote from being there. A lot of times people, if there's a fenced yard, people feel a security about having their dog outside, but coyotes, especially chain link fences, coyotes can clear those very, very quickly and jump over them. So, in areas, if you're walking your dog, make sure that your dog is on a leash and you have control of your dog. So if you see a coyote, you can pull your dog next to you, or we use this kind of artificial threshold of 20 pounds. If you've got a 20-pound or less dog, pick that dog up and have it, held in your arms so the coyote sees you and the dog is one. The other thing I'll quickly say is just understand what is normal for a coyote. So just because you see a coyote doesn't mean that anything bad is going to happen or will happen. It's just that animal is living in the same spaces as we are and is trying to make a living just like we are. So, educate yourself about what does normal look like for coyote behavior. And understand that. And when you see something abnormal, then understand, what are the tools that you have so you can feel like you're in control of that situation.
That was David Drake, a wildlife specialist at UW-Madison, speaking with WUWM's Eric Bond Fellow Maria Peralta Arellano. Minneapolis has become the center of debate on the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. 2 people have been killed by federal agents there, sparking community protests and calls for action by state and local leaders. Immigration is one of the topics our listeners have told us is top of mind, which inspired our podcast, Status Pending. The team has been following what's happening in the Twin Cities and across the nation when it comes to immigration enforcement. Stick with us because there's more to come on that soon. But today, we're bringing you a bonus episode of Status Pending. It comes from a small Presbyterian church on Milwaukee's northwest side. Dee Anderson was a pastor at West Granville Presbyterian Church for 40 years. He retired in 2025. But for years, he helped oversee the resettlement of international teachers coming to teach in Milwaukee public schools. You heard from 2 of those teachers in a previous Status Pending episode, Chigozie Okonkwo and Chioma Mba from Nigeria. They're part of Dee's congregation, and that's how WUWM's Audrey Nowakowski and Catherine Kokel met him. Here's Pastor Dee talking about why his church stepped up to meet the moment and how it's changed them for the better.
At the very front entrance of the original part of the church was founded in 1860 and the building was constructed in 1861. It says in German, the First Presbyterian Church. And originally it was the First Presbyterian Church of Granville. But it's in German, and so our immigrant identity is literally etched into the headstone of the church and part of the DNA and the very fabric of this congregation's founding and of its identity.
And you've updated it. You have been a place for German immigrants. What are the immigrant communities that use this church and that are parts of this church like now?
Now we are welcoming African immigrants, and particularly people who are being recruited from Milwaukee Public Schools to be teachers, because there's a shortage of teachers for Milwaukee Public Schools. And so they have a program that is recruiting from English-speaking countries. And so currently we have 5 teachers in our congregation, and they've come from Nigeria and Ghana and settled here with their families and are the latest new arrivals.
And they kind of sought you out, right?
They did, because in their home countries, they were part of the Presbyterian community. And so when they came here to Milwaukee and were looking to find a place to begin creating new connections, they sought out a Presbyterian identity and found us on the northwest side of Milwaukee.
And a lot of them live near here? Like, is that just because you helped settle them, or how does that work?
Well, when they come here as new arrivals to Milwaukee Public Schools, they're put into a hotel room or an extended stay for about a month, and then they have to find an apartment and begin to settle into the community. And the northwest side of Milwaukee has always been a place of affordable housing and settling. And one of the interesting things is when they move out of that hotel and move into their new apartments, they have nothing. And we have connected with them, and then we've been able to put out a call to the congregation that said, hey, we have somebody who's settling into their new apartment. And I am instantly flooded with offers of kitchen tables or sofas or chairs. We've helped them get beds. And then oftentimes we have a kind of rally moment where everybody brings their pickup trucks and we descend on their house and help them move in and settle. And one of the members of our church also puts together something that I'd never thought of, but it's really creative. They put together a toolbox for them, because who moves into their apartment and brings a toolbox from Ghana? And the fun of that is we get to go into their apartment and give to them a house blessing. And often we'll bring gifts like cleaning supplies and other things, some food to help them stock their kitchen or their pantry. And you get a sense that you're helping them make a new home, and you become friends and part of their family for life because you've shared this experience of helping them settle.
That sounds like to me such a soft landing, in kind of contrast to so many of the stories that we hear about people coming to this country utterly alone and unsupported. And like, it's a labyrinth, right? The process to get here is kind of purposefully confusing. And I don't mean that as a judgment. I mean that as pretty much a fact. And so I wonder, like, once people are on their feet and they feel that kind of like soft landing and welcome, what are their lives like here?
You know, it's a completely new beginning and a completely new experience. And one of the things that we have found is that helping people settle in that very first step opens all of the doorways to helping them as they settle into everything else. When they need a doctor, when they need car insurance, when they need to navigate our own healthcare system, when they need to figure out how to get a driver's license. And suddenly we become the number that they call, and we get a chance to go over, and we are also fed every time that we go over and do something or have a project. And it's like, try my specialty or try this food. And so much of culture is embraced in the food that we share. And so we've been able to share the gift of food and hospitality and welcome. Everybody who has participated in helping a family settle in and then navigate everything that they need to know in those first couple of crucial months has felt such a rich sense of reward and a sense of connection. And I was just talking to somebody just 2 days ago who said, one of our African families, who said it feels like family. We become, in the best sense, family that is shared together.
I do not know the political makeup of your congregation, but have you had conversations with people who welcome immigrant families that they undergo a different opinion after doing this?
I think what makes the difference, Katie, is that it's personal. And, you know, you can have a label on somebody, or you can see a stereotype of somebody, or see a news report about a particular group. But when it is a human being that's in your congregation, sitting in the pew next to you, that you've helped scrub their kitchen floor and stock their pantry, suddenly then they're a real life person and you know them by name. The other gift is the gift of children. And our congregation is filled with their children. And during our worship service, we have a moment which we call Time with Children. And you'll just hear the thundering footprints of the kids who run forward. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's such joy. I talked to one of our members who said that one of the reasons they love coming to church is to see the children, because they're a senior citizen and there's no other part of their life that they see children like that. Yeah. And so in terms of stereotypes, when you know a family and you know their kids and you're invested with them, I think it does change all of us. Regardless of what your political beliefs may have been, you now have an investment with the success of this family. Mm. And I've been invited to their high school graduations as their kids get older, and their college moments, and, you know, the growth of generational families as those continue. You know, we always feel like we are the ones who are learning and receiving and being the beneficiaries of. And so it isn't just one way, it is so mutual.
You mentioned it's like not a formal program, right? This is kind of organically built from people coming to the church, seeking out their church community that they had back home. But reading up on some of the church's history in helping previously enslaved people and helping them settle, has it just always been a tenet and a mission, or has it just grown organically just because of your values over the years?
You know, I think you raise a really good question. And part of our faith tradition has a teaching to love your neighbor as yourself. And that's just part of our core values, to love God, and then to turn around and love your neighbor as yourself, to show compassion and kindness. And these become tangible ways that we are actually helping a new neighbor. There's another teaching from our faith tradition where the question is asked, when did you see me hungry? When did you see me thirsty? And when did you see me as a stranger and welcome me? And then Jesus says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do to me. So I think it is built into our faith tradition to reach out and care for the stranger or for giving them welcome. But then also, it has seamlessly been a part of our community here at West Granville. In the 60s, we welcomed refugees from various parts of Eastern Europe and from Dutch Indonesia. And we're still in touch with those families to this day. In the early 2000s, we welcomed an African woman who was seeking asylum. And for 10 years, we helped settle her to an apartment, the exact same thing, helped her navigate the legal process. And she became a kind of grandmother to the whole congregation.
There is so much othering that I think is happening among many religious communities right now. There are a lot of people who want to capitalize on Christianity in the United States, specifically evangelical Christianity, to create an in-group and an out-group. And there are a lot of people in the out-group. I think who's in the out-group kind of changes over the decades and over the years. But right now, I would say that it's fair to say that people like the people who are coming here and looking for help and looking for families and looking to work in the United States are in the out-group. When you're thinking about your faith and the faith of the people in this congregation, how does the immigration work and the settling work that you do support that or challenge that?
I can only speak from our congregation's experience about what we experience here in this community. And one of the things that we have as you enter into the church is a giant circle banner that was made for our 150th anniversary. And it is made up of scraps of material that have been all put together into a single quilt that hangs in the entrance of the church. And it is to represent our welcoming of the fullness of diversity for whatever people have come from. And the gift of that welcome is that our community becomes richer. And if you only think of it as opposites or labels or others, you miss the fact that our community becomes stronger and richer and more vital with every person that we welcome here together. And so my understanding of Jesus is he's the one who sought out the people who are most in need of comfort and care and said, come on, sit down at the table with me. Zacchaeus, get out of the tree, have a dinner. I'm coming to your house tonight. And so my idea of Jesus is a pretty broad tent. And I think our experience personally is our congregation has been far more vital by welcoming all people inside the doors and celebrating with them. And then we get to have all the gifts of their experience that we learn from. And whether it's their food or their culture or their life or their identity, it has made our congregation more vital.
I was interviewing a pastor at an AME church in South Carolina a number of years ago, and he said to me, it's easy to accept someone who looks like you, who votes like you, who talks like you, who works like you, whose family looks like yours. And he said it's far more difficult and it's far more gratifying to accept someone who has nothing in common with you. And you have something very important in common with the families that are coming in their Presbyterian faith, but it seems like that's kind of where their similarities end for a bit. And so I think just this isn't a question, but it's fascinating to hear how people challenge themselves and they put themselves out, it sounds like, in many different ways.
And I think there's two other things to that. One of them is you have to have a healthy sense of curiosity because your curiosity leads into wanting to know more about their life or their family. I went to one family And the first thing on my very first day of visiting them in their home, they got out their wedding album.
Whoa.
And they wanted to show me pictures of their wedding back in their home country. And by the time I left there, I felt like I was a richer person because they talked to me about the special customs that took place at the wedding. And they showed me pictures of their mom and of their dad and of their uncle who had to approve of the wedding. And I walked away from there and said, this is one of the best days of my life, you know? And so that sense of wanting to know more about somebody who may be outwardly different from you, but also knit with you in that sense of shared purpose and community. And then accepting the gifts and the talents that everybody brings along the way as they add their own cultural influence to our worship service or to our meetings or to our purposefulness just makes our community grow. We've had several Sundays in worship where we've invited people to stand up. We did a closing benediction or a closing blessing where we invited a number of different families to give that blessing in their own local language. And so we heard it in French and we heard it in several local traditional dialects and languages, and a way of just demonstrating to the congregation that we're all speaking the blessing of peace, but all hearing it with different voices, and those different voices make a mighty chorus.
That was WUWM's Catherine Kokel and Audrey Nowakowski, speaking with retired pastor Dee Anderson at West Granville Presbyterian Church. You can hear the story on work visas with a couple of the international teachers in episode 4 of WUWM's Status Pending podcast. Just like Status Pending, you can also find Lake Effect as a podcast, so you can listen when you like. Find it wherever you get your podcasts, then subscribe, download, and listen on demand. The UWM Planetarium is tackling an age-old question. What are the origins of the universe? We'll tell you more in about 10 minutes. But first, if you're looking for a laugh this weekend, we'll tell you about a comedy tournament coming to the Milwaukee area. That's coming up next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. You're listening to Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. A comedy competition is making its Milwaukee debut this weekend at the very famous X-Ray Arcade. One-Liner Madness is a bracketed competition between local comedians, battling it out one sentence at a time. Although this will be its first time in the Cream City, the competition series is a decade old and has featured hundreds of comedians and thousands of one-liners. Emily Winter is one of the creators of One-Liner Madness, and she'll be emceeing the event here in Milwaukee. Dana Ehrman is a local comedian who will be taking part in the competition. They're both here now to talk about it. Emily, Dana, thank you both so much for being here on Lake Effect.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
So how does this show work? What is the setup?
So One-Liner Madness, I started it with a friend back when I lived in New York in 2016, and we decided to see if it would be possible to wrangle 64 comedians, get them all in the same room, and get them in a March Madness style single elimination short joke tournament. And we couldn't believe that we were able to pull it off because comedians are known to be a bit irresponsible, don't listen to rules, but we did it. And so I decided to start taking it all over the country, and now we are setting up for our first ever show in Milwaukee. So it's a very fast-paced, you'll hear 126 jokes in 100 minutes, a very fast-paced, rapid-fire single elimination joke tournament, and audience applause determines who advances. So it really depends on what everybody there likes.
So what would we consider a one-liner in this context?
Sure. So we do let comedians have up to 3 sentences so that they can do a proper setup and punchline. If they start just telling a story, going down a long path, we blow the whistle and they are eliminated. So for one of our shows, we had a comedian who was 14 years old. This was in San Diego last year, and he had a joke that I loved, and it was, well, I still live with my parents, like all the other comedians on this show. And he was competing against a bunch of adults, and that like really everyone loved it, and he advanced on that. So that was actually a true one-liner, but they do have up to 3 sentences.
Very nice. This is really a question for both of you, but Emily, I'm thinking you might be the expert here. What is the trick to a really good one-liner?
Oh, okay. So I'm actually really excited to hear what Dana has to say about this. But for me, what I've noticed with these shows, and you know what, I've hosted this show over 50 times around the country, but I have never competed in my own show. And my husband, who's a comedian, is always like, you don't know how scary and horrifying it is. But for me, what I always like and what I think delights a crowd is an element of surprise. So if you can twist a joke, like a basic joke, and make it somehow surprising. For example, there's this comedian who is in North Carolina. His name's Jordan Scott Huggins, and he had a joke that was, I just flew in from Chernobyl, and boy, are my arms legs. And I love that joke. It just catches the whole audience by surprise. So yeah, Dana, what do you think?
What makes a good one-liner? Beats me is the thing, because I am not normally that type of comic, but that's why it's exciting for 64 different comics to get into this competition. I love something that's going to make me stretch myself and write differently than I normally do. It's a fantastic exercise, and so I'm quite literally in the process of it.
I was going to say, this seems very different from like your average stand-up set. How do you prepare for something like this?
I think the first thing that I'm doing is I am taking stock of, everything in my repertoire, everything I do on a show normally, and seeing if there are instances, jokes I already have that fit into that format, or anything I could really cut the fat and fit into that format. So I'm going to start with what I have, but otherwise, nothing's off limits. Otherwise, I'm going to have to grab from, topical stuff just to make sure I have enough material.
I was going to say, have you watched the tapes? Are you strategizing, learning from other comedians?
Yes, but that's something you can only do so much of. I feel like you can do too much, and then, like Emily's husband Chris was saying, like, it freaks you out.
It's so funny. The woman who won Chicago last year, she participated 2 years in a row, and she even reused one of her jokes. And it did not do well the first year. So I'm not sure why she reused it the second year, but you could tell that she had so much more confidence in her delivery the second year, and she had clearly like grown so much as a comedian. And so when she was able to do her joke like with confidence and put her whole self behind it, the audience ate it up. And then she went on to win the whole thing. That was Sonal Agarwal. But yeah, so I just, it's a lot to do with like your personal style and owning whatever that style is.
So looking at this specific show, it's 64 different comedians. Are these mostly folks who are local to Wisconsin, like yourselves?
Yes, absolutely. So I just moved to Wisconsin from Los Angeles, so I don't know too many Wisconsin comedians. I was lucky enough to meet Dana and get to see her comedy on a show recently. There's like 5 comedians that I know, and I said, who do you guys like? And so I got recommendations from other comedians. So I just want to book based on who everyone else loves. That's what I do when I don't know all of the comics. But yeah, I think there's a couple people coming in from Illinois, but generally it's Wisconsin and especially Milwaukee. Dana, you know most of the people on the list, right?
I would say, and it's so exciting to see, I've got some of my friends on this show that I've known for 10 years and done comedy with, and then there are those handful that I am not familiar with at all. And there's a wide variety. You've got Rory Roosh, who has been named Madison's funniest comic in the past, so he's formidable, but you've got Chris Schmidt from Milwaukee, who is he's like a one-liner comic in a way already. So he's going to be locked and loaded. So it's just coming at you from all sides.
Well, Dana, Emily, thank you both so much for joining us here on Lake Effect, and good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for letting us be here.
Emily Winter is one of the creators of One-Liner Madness, which will be making its Milwaukee debut this Saturday, January 31st, at X-Ray Arcade. Dana Ehrman is a local comedian who will be featured in the competition. For tickets and more information, you can head to xrayarcade.com. Coming up next, we'll explore the birth of the universe with astronomy contributor Gene Creighton. That's next on Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR. This is Lake Effect on 89.7 WUWM. I'm Joy Powers. The origins of the cosmos date back almost 14 billion years. There have been many theories about the birth of the universe throughout human history. And as technology has improved, so have the methods to test those theories. To learn more about the clues astronomers have used to understand the birth and transformation of the universe, Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski is joined by contributor Gene Creighton.
Gene Creighton, welcome back to Lake Effect. Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year, Audrey. Happy New Year.
So you are diving into a new year of programming and events at the Manfred Olson Planetarium, and your upcoming show, Birth of the Universe, will explore the origins of the cosmos going back almost 14 billion years with a B. So as far as us as humans and our understanding goes, what would you say were some of the first widespread clues or theories that astronomers used to recognize that, yes, there's an actual beginning to the universe?
Okay. So let's first of all acknowledge that people around the world have been curious about how the universe came to be. And some of the common ideas have been that the universe has always been there and that it's infinite in size. So if that's the case, we come up with a paradox. So Olbers is genuinely, in 1923, he said, but wait a second. If the universe is infinite and eternal, always been there, that means that there has been enough time for stars to send light regardless of where they are. So anywhere I would look, even in the night sky, it should be bright like the sun. It's true, stars close to us would be bright, but distant stars, they might be dim, but they're many, many, many more. The volume of space that has them is much larger. So he wondered, so how come the night sky isn't as bright as day? Now, the person who's often quoted for proposing this is the sign that the universe had a beginning is Edgar Allan Poe. And that means that, okay, the universe actually had a start, which means that some stars are so far that their light is en route, but it hasn't reached us yet. Which is an interesting idea, right?
Yeah.
If you think of light as traveling at a finite speed, a high speed, yes, but a finite speed, it means it takes time to get places, even if you're light.
Yes, and you mentioned Edgar Allan Poe. People would probably be most familiar with him in an English class or something like that. But did he dabble in astronomy a lot?
I don't think so. I think this was a philosophical question. And that brings us to modern time, that until my lifetime, really, cosmology was something that everybody could sit around a coffee or a beer or whatever and discuss, what kind of universe do you like? Oh, I like this kind of universe. Because there was no data to ground to differentiate between a good idea and a better idea. So that's when cosmology in the 60s became exciting.
Yeah. more like experiments you could test.
That's right. That's
instead
right.
of theorize around
let's
the coffee.
Just discuss my opinion versus yours, or my aesthetic. It also became I like this kind of universe. So in the 60s, for the first time, we were able to see the sky in microwave light. So that's not something that our eyes can see. But just like when you put food in a microwave oven, you don't see the light that's happening in there, but it does carry energy. And you can warm up your food. In the sky, in every direction, we were able to see microwave light. And this was considered at first a bug, a problem. It was measured with Bell Lab antennas, and they thought, oh, we just need to clean the poop from the pigeons. You know, this is an error. This isn't real.
Yeah.
This is a glitch. And when they ruled out all these things and realized that this was predicted from the Big Bang Theory, not the television series, but the actual theory, they thought, whoa, what? Okay. So that was the light that the universe produced when it had its hot beginning, what's now referred to as the Big Bang. The hot beginning, as the universe expanded, that hot light, that light that has very short wavelengths, got stretched out into microwave wavelengths. So that was our first real clue that, okay, the Big Bang is a thing. The universe had a hot beginning, as one of the theories suggested.
Yeah, and it's always exciting when it's like, okay, here's a theory. Here's something that leads to confirming said theories or arguments. And you mentioned how microwave light was a key thing in this discovery. And in our current lifetimes and your area of studies, as technology has improved, I imagine so did methods of studying all of this improve now that there's more data. So how did technology contribute to understanding the start of the universe better outside of the microwave light that you just mentioned? Were there any other telescopes, say, or any other measures that people developed?
Well, I'm going to lean into the microwave, actually.
Sure.
So the Planck telescope was the most recent one. But before then, the first images that we got, and Penzias and Wilson picked up a Nobel Prize for the first observations, the universe looked entirely uniform in microwaves. And this made them feel pretty uneasy because the universe is not uniform. There are places where there are many more galaxies and other places where there really isn't much. So that made them uneasy. I mean, this was a great discovery to make, but then they thought, okay, we need better contrast. We need to be able to see smaller changes in the microwave background, which is what it's called, microwave background. So the instruments got better and better, and we were able to see with time how that uniform thing is not uniform at a low level. We see the very first seeds that make galaxies eventually over time. Because remember, this is a baby picture of the universe. This is how it was when it was only 400,000 years old. This is the microwave background that we see is capturing the very first light that the universe can give us. So we're seeing the universe when it was effectively a toddler. And before then, there is no light. Light and matter are kind of entwined in a very tight way. So before then, probably we would have to wait until we have gravitational waves. So that's in the future. But we have sensitive enough instruments to measure gravitational interactions of the early universe.
So start of the 60s is really where we get some changes in technologies. We're able to get more info to study and put evidence to these theories. For today, what are the latest developments or discoveries continuing to happen in this field?
The new developments are that the universe is expanding, yes. For the last 20 years or so, based on some observations of supernova, we had an idea that maybe the universe is accelerating in its expansion. And now some of our new data is putting a question mark on that. So as, you know, these observatories, the Vera Rubin, for example, when we're going to be collecting data at an unprecedented rhythm, we're going to get enough supernova we'll be able to actually really lock that in. Yes, we see that expansion at an accelerated rate, or maybe not. Maybe what we thought based on the limited data that we had, 25 years ago now, maybe it sent us a little bit astray. But that's the exciting thing about cosmology, right? That you continuously learn more and you get a better understanding.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for helping us get a better understanding of some of the topics that you're exploring at the planetarium. And for today, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks so much.
Jean Creighton is our regular astronomy contributor, and she spoke with Lake Effect's Audrey Nowakowski. The Manfred Olson Planetarium's Birth of the Universe show is every Friday at 7 p.m. through February 27th. And that wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Joy Powers. If you missed any of Lake Effect this week, you can find all of our conversations at WUWM.com. If you'd like to take the show on the go, you can download the Lake Effect podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Tomorrow on Lake Effect, we'll look at ways Milwaukee neighborhood groups are creating home ownership opportunities for community members. Plus, we'll tell you about the birding backpacks you can check out from the library. Thanks so much for joining us right here on listener-supported 89.7 WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.